All right guys, so today we're going to get into the heart and soul of this entire build, and that's the motor and the carbs that drive it. So almost a year ago, actually a little over a year ago today, I pulled this motor out of a garage in Florida, and it wasn't by any means a good motor. We found out pretty quick. This is an original 48 Panhead. This is a first year Panhead engine, and you know, the build obviously took a lot of different directions as we started off, and you know, different ideas and kicking around stuff when we, you know, go down the road of trying to build something like this. And when we got into the Built Wells People's Champ Show, it kind of gave me the chance to say, okay, we're going to go out of the normal, like what I usually do with my builds, and we're going to try something else and try to do something that hasn't been done and try to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So when we decided to do that, I had this motor sitting there ready to go to get rebuilt, I should say, and you know, we chose this for the platform. So again, this is a 48 Panhead. It's actually 48 heads, 48 cylinders, and it's 57 cases, but it is all original Harley-Davidson equipment. It's not aftermarket. There's nothing aftermarket on there. And when we tore into it, I actually disassembled the motor here at the very beginning of the competition, and we found out pretty early on that everything seemed okay, but once you get into something, you kind of find all the things that are hidden and what you don't know about when you can't really tell what you're looking at when you're looking at an engine from the outside. And the biggest thing I noticed was the cases had some really serious pitting in them. And I think coming from Florida, the only thing we can think of is, you know, the original bikes have belly pans underneath the engines, and there must have been some salt from the sea, because you know, this was close to the ocean down in Daytona area. It must have been sitting in that pan in the salt water, and every time the guy put the bike on the kickstand, it was just kind of resting the bottom of the cases in the salt water. So the bottom left side of these cases were pretty messed up. So we ended up having to weld these things like 5 times, and anybody that knows about welding cases, especially old cases, it's really hard, and it doesn't really work out too well for the most part. Unless you got somebody who really knows what they're doing. So luckily, we had some guys locally that have some experience welding aluminum cases and stuff, and we took it to those guys, and they were able to help us out. And you know, it caused some other issues with the cases warping and stuff, but you know, I had a couple really good friends of mine, George Banks and Gary Ellis down the road here. They're part of our crew. You know, they build engines and stuff, and they wanted to take it on, so we went to work and started doing that. And you know, we got these things welded 4 or 5 different times. The cases would warp, so we'd have to go back, or we'd develop another crack, we'd have to go back. And finally we got it nipped in the butt, so to speak. But the entire inside of this thing and the outside of the cases, they're all reworked. And by reworked, I mean we had to make our own pinion bushings. We made them out of our own bronze, oil impregnated bronze material, machined them down from stock, and started from scratch. So this motor has got balanced flywheels, and everything's trued. The cases have been rewelded, patched, and you know, made like new again. And then Gary went through and actually hand sanded everything on this thing. So these cases aren't just your typical 57 Panhead cases. They actually have been hand worked. And when you get really close and look at the motor and look at the details, you can see everything's been sat and polished on the bottom end of this. And he did it all by different steps of files, stones, and you know, emery cloth, and you know, different things like that. So he went through, hand sanded these things. All the high raised edges, like your fins, your supports, are all mirror polished. And after he did all that, you know, they would finish machining. They went through, redecked the motor mount pads and everything, so it would set nice and level in there like it should be, and you don't have any gaps or spaces. We didn't even have to shim this motor. It actually sat perfectly flat on both mounting pads, which is kind of rare as well, especially for a stock Harley-Davidson engine. And you know, we wanted to reuse as much of the stuff as we could because we want original equipment. So these are the stock 48 cylinders. We have a quick weight boring bar. We went through and actually bored these cylinders out, fit them to our pistons, and then these are 48 heads as well. The heads needed some serious reworking. The seats needed redone and all that kind of stuff. So we went through, redid the seats, and Gary actually, you know, again, polished up these original 48 heads. All the fins are actually mirror polished on the edges, and then he got down in the crevices and got all the imperfections out the best he could. And we actually put brand new kibble weight valves, kibble weight springs, all that stuff, all the best components we could get to clean these up. And then I got the heavy style D-rings, new rocker box covers, and that good stuff. So, you know, this thing turned out really, really nice. There's a lot of time into this. I think we right around 6.5 months or so is into just the motor itself, getting this motor set up. You know, new rods, new pistons, all that good stuff. The entire cam chest was missing, so we had to do the entire cam chest. All the gears in the cam chest, everything's new, or, you know, new old stock, that kind of thing. And when we were coming around to getting closer and closer to done with the motor, obviously I was building the rest of the bike at the same time, and we were coming up with some different ideas, and obviously I was trying to go outside the box again. And you know, a lot of times it makes it a little difficult when you're doing stuff that either hasn't been done or stuff that's not off the shelf tested, that kind of thing. And I really like the dual carb setup. I've always been a fan of dual carbs. They just look good on like custom bikes and stuff. It gives them an, you know, more mechanical look, which obviously with this build, that's what I was going for. And I didn't just want to get a dual carb manifold, I wanted to make one. And we've had a lot of questions about this stuff over the last few videos we posted for you guys. So I'm going to get into detail about what that's all about. And what we did is we went to work, we were getting some different ideas. We were looking at different dual carb setups, and there wasn't really anything out there that I liked. So we just decided to make our own from scratch. So what we did is we went in and used our, you know, 3D CAD software. We used SolidWorks for all of our modeling and stuff. Kevin got we took the dimensions from a stock intake manifold, and this is the O-ring style. This is updated from the plumber style intake. We modeled the intake manifold, and I like Linkerts. I'm personally a Linkert fan. You know, Linkerts, this is what originally came on this Panhead in 48. These are M74Bs, so I wanted to run Linkerts on this bike. We wanted to keep the manifold having some options for mount points, and then we could use it for other projects as well once we got it designed. So what we did is every one of these manifolds has a stock Linkert bolt pattern, okay? So the center manifold is, you know, 2 different areas for 2 Linkerts to bolt to. You could have them bolt one out each side, but we went further and we made an intake for each side, and we wanted them to wrap around the front of the motor and face forward and kind of hang out there in the open so you can see them, so it looked kind of cool, you know. And that's what we did. So we got to work on that, and we had to try to match the lengths of the intakes the best we could, because you don't want one to be way longer than the other. The engine, you know, getting the carbs dialed in and getting your linkages and stuff like that set up wouldn't be that easy. So this, on, you know, this side versus the right side of the bike has a wicked bend in it right here, and the reason that is in there is to match the length of the other side, and they're really close. They're not exact, but they're pretty much as close as we could get it with them not being staggered drastically on either side. So we were going to sand cast these, because I do some sand casting, make, you know, sand molds and stuff like that, and we were going to go that route, but I was really running out of time. We only had, you know, about 7 months to build this bike from start to finish, and we built everything on the bike except the wheels, pretty much. I mean, everything on this bike we built here. So it was really hard to take on all that extra stuff. So what we ended up doing is when we got the models done, we had these manifolds 3D printed out of aluminum. So both of these manifolds and the centerpiece here, this is all 3D printed aluminum intake, and it really actually turned out really nice. This is the first time I've used 3D printed aluminum for anything. Like I said, we usually cast stuff or, you know, just make it by hand, but it really worked out pretty well. And, you know, my buddy Gary, he went through and actually, again, with like what he did with the motor, he took his stones and his you know, different kinds of sandpaper and stuff and went through and started polishing this up, and it turned out really nice. We put our company logo on the top manifold over here to kind of represent what we got going on, and, you know, that was all possible because of the 3D printing stuff. But once I got the manifolds in, cleaned them up, I thread and tapped everything, used our hardware, and then I set the dual Linkerts up on the manifolds. And we had to make special brackets, since these are hanging out so far, to kind of support the Linkerts. And then we had to make our cross linkage so that when you're using your internal throttle spiral, you know, both Linkerts that can open at the same time. So we got those dialed in, got the bike run on both cars, was pretty cool. And we went another step further, and I was like, you know, it'd be really cool if we ran clear linker bowls. You know, I've seen clear fuel bowls on some carburetors in the past, Mikuni, I think Lectron has them. And Linkerts, you know, it's an old school thing. You only really see the old timers running these kind of bikes and stuff. So I was like, well, let's make one for a linker. So that's what we did. Again, we got to work, modeled these up, and these are made out of hard heat-resistant resin. And we've been testing them for a couple months, and we're finding out the different variations hold up differently, but we're actually going another step, and we're coating these to hold up against fuel and stuff. And I've been using them on the bike, and they're actually working pretty well right now. But yeah, so that's what we made these as well. These bowls, these are cast resin. And you know, we ran a dual fuel line down to feed each carburetor, and again, I wanted to keep it mechanical, and I wanted you to be able to see everything on the bike, because you can actually look through the entire motorcycle. So, you know, we hand bent all these copper line, ran hard lines to a soft line. It's got an inline petcock for your fuel, so you can shut your fuel on and off, and all that good stuff. So that's pretty much, that's the motor, that's the carburetors, that's the drivetrain, that's the heart of the entire build there, 48 Panhead. The exhaust I made by hand as well. I did that off of an old school, like the old cars, the old race cars that had like the aviation engines and stuff like that, the big 12-cylinder inline rail engines. And if you look back at those, they all have like a collector style manifold, okay? So you have however many cylinders the car has, they're running into one giant collector and out the side. So I kind of took inspiration from one of those cars, again, vintage racing and, you know, teens, 20s era, and I incorporated that into the exhaust on the bike. So I ran 2 pipes, and I wanted to hug it as close as I could to the motor. I got it real tight, and I ran the pipes down into a collector megaphone that I made, and welded it all up, and it actually turned out pretty cool. I like how it looks, so I'm pretty happy with that. And then working our way back a little further, we transmission. Again, it's original equipment. It's a Panhead transmission. It has no ears on it. It's an early style Panhead transmission, and I bought it. This is a case and a few gears. It needed completely reworked. These are things that are getting really hard to come by if you don't already have one. So I bought it from a friend, and we got to work on that. Had to rebuild the entire transmission. Went through, put the best stuff we could in it, all the high-end stuff, Andrews gears, that kind of thing. Baker Drivetrain was kind enough to donate for the competition. They hooked us up with an entire kicker set, their 4-speed kicker set. So that was really cool of them. We use that, of course, because this, you know, the transmission is, you know, crank inertia start versus, and it also has a kickstart as well. So we wanted to use those gears. They're nice and strong. I used a ratchet top style cover. Original transmission for this old of a bike would have had a drum top trans with a shift gate on your tank. I was gonna go that route, but with the dual carb manifold and this sticking out the side, it was gonna mess up all my linkages, and I didn't want to have it all clustered up here when I was building the bike. So I ended up going with the newer style ratchet top. So I have a, you know, manual hand shifter right here, ratchet top style, suicide shifter. This is my foot clutch here. Made all this rod that goes back to the transmission. Bent all this out of stainless, like everything on the bike, it's all stainless. This rod, stainless. This was supplied by a friend of mine. Again, I was kind of running out of time at the end, so I called in a couple little favors here and there, and he made this up by hand out of stainless rod, and he made the brass top here. He really came through and helped me out. He actually hooked me up with a couple other things too, and his name's Joe Marshall from Joe Marshall Customs. You know, a real good friend of mine. He helped out a lot in this thing as far as he helped me get to the deadline at the end. So I'm real grateful for that. This turned out amazing. He was able to kind of see what else I was building for the bike at the time, and he you know, he did a really nice job of matching it. So that's my hand shifter, stock trans, the entire trans case blasted. Then it was all hand polished to a satin finish to match the motor. So like when you're looking at this bike up close and detail wise, you're gonna be able to see all this stuff. You know, there's nothing untouched on this thing. We went through every nook and cranny and got it as best as we could. And you know, it looks pretty cool up close. So that's our drivetrain. If you guys got any questions or comments or anything, let us know and sign up for our email. And you know, we'll send out some updates and stuff like that for our next videos. The last real in-depth video we're going to do on this bike is going to be the inertia system and the inertia starter, everything we got going on and how we got to this, and you know, kind of where we started with the entire build. And then after that, we'll do some running videos and show you guys how everything works, and you know, when the bike's on the ground and riding and everything else. And as always, thanks for watching.